On that particular night, I lay there with my eyes closed, locked in a state of semi-awakeness. As the gentle wind fluttered through the drapes, I perceived the door softly creaking open. "Dale?" I whispered under my breath. "Could it be you?" It was clearly not Dale's voice that answered, though. Oliver spoke in an almost timid low voice. "I am inconsolable." Upon opening my eyes, I beheld the figure standing in the doorway. His face was partially illuminated by the moonlight as it filtered over his shoulder. My mouth sprang open in shock. It was odd for him to visit my room at this hour. "Is that you, Oliver? Is there an issue?" Quietly I inquired. There was an undercurrent of astonishment in my voice. "No, you have no idea. All I did was just, no rest for me." As he entered, he made the statement. I sat up in bed and drew the blanket closer to me as he drew nearer. "Could you tell me what to do? Need some water? I can fetch you a glass." His body language conveyed his disapproval. "No, my intention was to initiate conversation, so long as I am not an annoyance." His words had an air of anxious strain that weighed down the entire room. "I reassured you that you weren't annoying me, but my voice betrayed my uncertainty. Nevertheless, right now, is something on your mind?" Before quickly looking down at the floor, he shrugged and locked eyes with me for an instant. "You have no idea. At times it seems like everyone is waiting for me to do something. No one but college and my dad. However, I am not under any such strain while I am with you." I felt an odd connection to what he said. I moved around a little and put my hand on the bedside table while I tried to make sense of it. "Please sit down," I commanded almost mechanically. "Are you prepared? Reason being, this is no ordinary tale. On this adventure, our emotions will mix and our limits will dissolve. This is probably the first time you've heard a confession like this, so bear with us. Stay up to date and enable push notifications. If you've ever heard a story, this one will blow your mind." He was hesitant to sit down beside me at first. Placing his hands on his knees and sitting quietly for a minute, he exuded an air of innocent uneasiness. After that, he began to talk. He said, "I know my dad loves me, but he avoided looking at me. But there are moments when I feel completely alone. As if his world isn't mine to inhabit." I was taken aback by Oliver's speech pattern. Optimistic and slightly naughty, he had always been. A carefree-looking young guy. It hadn't occurred to me that there was so much chaos beneath. Personally, I think that's pretty typical. You're maturing and evolving. These emotions will pass. Neither your dad nor I have ever met someone like you before, Oliver." He hesitated for a second before speaking in an almost whispery tone. "Is it possible that we will always be familiar to each other?" He hesitated for a second before speaking in an almost whispery tone. "Is it possible that we will always be familiar to each other?" Even in the serene environment, his words resounded. In my chest, an unusual constriction had developed. Looking at him was too much for me. I lacked the guts to figure out why my heart was pounding. I spoke carefully to Oliver about how it wasn't fair for him to visit my room at this hour, and how maybe he needed some space to himself. He responded fast as a flash if I expressed a preference not to be alone. In addition to sounding like a plea, his voice contained a challenge. I realized I needed to gather myself together at that very second. "Listen," I replied, my voice now more forceful. "Keep in mind that doing the right thing is essential when you feel this way. By the very nature of this discussion, I am your stepmother." He glanced over at me and my words slipped out of my mouth. A terrifying combination of desire, anxiety, and fragility was visible in his eyes. He called me Andrea, and the way he said my name made me shudder. I never intended to feel guilty about this, but it's hard for me to fathom how it might be when you're in my thoughts. When he did that, I should have intervened. Instead of letting him continue, I should have asked him to exit the room. However, I refrained from doing so since meeting that intense stare also compelled me to face my own emotions. Oliver could be made out in the room's low lighting. The expression on his face veered between a boy's vulnerability and a man's complexity. "Are you okay if I sleep here?" Asking in a low voice, he spoke it. My jaw dropped for one instant. I preferred not to probe his statements for their intended meaning. I ought to have perceived him merely as a perplexed youth in need of assistance. I took a deep breath and tried to keep my cool. "Sure," I whispered softly. You are welcome to remain here if that helps. On the other side of the bed, he gently lay down. In an effort to gain my balance, I drew the blanket closer to me. I tried to keep my anxious feelings bottled inside. In the end, I was his stepmother. He was so young, only 19 years old. I took out my phone to pass the time. Dale had sent a message. Tonight I will not return home. Putting in all the hours at the office. My anxiety was already high before I read the message. I would not even need to consider the potential outcomes of this scenario if Dale were present. But at this point, recognizing Oliver's emotional state and reacting appropriately were my top priorities. Are you all right? I turned to face him and asked. With you by his side, he finally felt better, he whispered. To my surprise, his voice had a deeper bass. We remained motionless for some time. The same thought kept popping into my head. He is only a child. I must assist him in overcoming his challenges. However, I was taken aback when I suddenly sensed motion. As he came up behind me, Oliver moved in closer. He gently placed an arm over me and caressed my back. Despite my beating heart, I remained motionless. I muttered to Oliver, "Just what are you up to?" "I'm cold," he stated rather frankly. It seemed like it was about more than just being icy, though, because of his tone. I drew a long breath. This required my utmost care. Being so young, he was likely bewildered and battling to make sense of his complex emotions. I mean, surely this was just innocent? As I laid there motionless, I attempted to persuade myself of that. The intimacy was causing internal turmoil. My thoughts were all over the place and my heart was pounding. At least for the time being, I told myself I must end this. However, I was immobile. His voice reverberated through me like an irresistible wave, and he whispered to Andrea. Oliver's grip on my waist grew tighter. I felt the gentle caress of his warm breath on my neck. In my attempt to formulate a plan of action, I shut my eyes. I was consumed by an inner tempest. Do you not see this as a simple display of affection? I persisted in attempting to persuade myself. I knew he was asleep when his breathing became regular. However, I was unable to fall asleep. My heart was racing so rapidly that it seemed like it could be heard from across the room. My frustration with myself was overwhelming. To what extent has this influenced me? So why am I on edge? His vitality and youthful self-awareness, nevertheless. It unsettled me. This intimacy. I prayed this wasn't malicious. I, too, dropped off after a while, consumed by my racing thoughts and eventually overcome by tiredness. I opened my eyes as soon as the light entered the room. I felt a little pressure on my arm. Oliver remained sound asleep. The innocence on his face was almost childlike. He seemed calm and collected. I didn't initially think it was the innocence that made me uneasy, but that was when it hit me. Behind it all was the complexity. With a cautious motion of my arm, I rose from my bed. I looked back at him as I stood up. His broad shoulders, lofty stature, and those sharp features. Since our initial meeting, I couldn't help but observe his remarkable transformation. To myself I murmured, "Wow, he's matured." I was surprised by how much more mature it was. Something only a flash shifted within me. A peculiar self-awareness that I preferred not to mention was mingled with shame. I brushed it off, threw on a lightweight jacket over my pajamas, and bolted out of the room. I drew in breaths as I descended the steps. I told myself to pretend it was just another ordinary morning. I went to the kitchen to divert my attention. It seemed like a good idea to make breakfast because it would occupy my hands and thoughts. However, Oliver's body laying upstairs kept coming back my mind. Everything about him, his presence, his sleeping face, stayed with me, unsettling me. I reminded myself repeatedly. Everyone mistook it for a fleeting moment. There's no need to worry. No harm is intended. I will not exaggerate the situation. I went into the kitchen and got the breakfast going. Even as I tuned into the coffee maker's gentle hum, the sight of Oliver upstairs lingered in my thoughts. I needed to gather myself. There is complete mastery. My inner voice pleaded with me to remain composed. I was taken aback by Dale's voice at that moment. He greeted his sweetheart with a good morning, as he limped into the doorway, his expression bearded and exhausted. My body went into a frozen state while I pondered my next move. Suddenly I pushed on a smile. "Right now," I said. A peck on the cheek came from Dale as he approached me. Being so near to him made me feel even more anxious. Great aroma fills the room. Will breakfast be ready soon? He inquired, as upbeat as ever. I spoke in a slightly higher-pitched voice than normal, assuring them that it will be ready soon. Over his shoulder, Dale yelled out as he departed from the kitchen. Then I'll take a nap in the living room. I've had enough. His approach to the living room sent a shiver down my spine. Could he find Oliver in the room if he goes upstairs? Who am I to speak? In what ways can I clarify this? I exhaled heavily as Dale's boots padded toward the living room. Thankfully, he had no plans to go upstairs just yet. Despite my shaking hands, I hastily assembled the breakfast table. I tried very hard not to draw Dale's attention to anything. His body was sprawled out on the couch as he dozed off the moment my eyes landed on the room. I felt a tiny bit better when I heard his calm breathing. At least I'm not in danger right now, I reasoned. However, it was insufficient to alleviate the unease I felt within. We can't continue in this manner. Some action is required of me. I set the coffee cup down on the table, my thoughts racing. Dale had come down from upstairs and Oliver remained there. I had to figure out a way to make things my own. The question is, how? Afterwards that morning, Oliver entered the kitchen as Dale was still fast sleeping. I felt uneasy as we sat at the breakfast table and saw his carefree expression. I clenched my fists over my coffee cup and did my best to act casually in response to his conversation. Out of nowhere, he said, "Andrea, you look absolutely stunning today." His voice was full of self-assurance and seemed much older than his years. Without realizing it, my gaze shifted to him, as if he were going to speak more but refrained. I responded with an attempt to maintain a steady tone of voice. "Thank you, Oliver." A moment's quietness passed. "Excuse me, I hope your day isn't too hectic," he replied as he began to prod at the eggs on his plate. "Notify me if there is anything I can do to assist you." His countenance was solemn, yet the quality of his words unsettled me. "At school there are many more vital things for you to concentrate on," I told you. Though kind, his remarks had given me the creeps. As he retrieved his luggage and made his way out the door, a slight sense of relief washed over me. Still, an odd sensation persisted in my chest. This young man, he's experiencing a new sensation, isn't he? Dale woke up about midday after Oliver left the house. After a leisurely breakfast, he prepared to go to work. The house felt more peaceful after he left. We sat down to a typical family supper that night, acting as if nothing had happened. Pretending like it was any other ordinary day, I went along with it. However, as soon as darkness descended, that peculiar tension began to resurface. Dale was contacted by phone. David, his best buddy, was in the hospital after an accident. With that, Dale made up his mind to flee. He kissed me and whispered, "Don't worry, sweetheart," while he got ready. "I will return at my earliest convenience." I escorted him to the door, stood there as he departed, and then shut it behind him. I had an unusually deep sense of loneliness. Even though I felt absolutely alone in the house, it was as if I wasn't. On my way back to the bedroom, I stopped at the door. The lock drew my attention. So should I secure it? Oliver, what if? Can we handle it if he returns? Attempting to pull myself together, I shook my head. Andrea, please stop. He is only a child. For what reason are you even considering this? The idea just wouldn't go away no matter how much I fought it. For some reason, I felt better after climbing into bed and pulling the thin cover over me. My eyes were shut. The unease, however, persisted. No end came to the night. Calm and peaceful. Still, there are moments when total quiet seems like the biggest danger. In my head, Oliver materialized, striding resolutely toward me. A chill went down my spine as I registered just how near he was. For a brief second, I was at a loss as to what I should do as the mental chaos escalated. Why is this taking place? With his gaze fixed on mine, Oliver leaned in my direction at that very instant. Even in myself, I could see the signs of reluctance and anxiety. My voice quivered as I spoke and I took a step back. Oliver, please. The anxiety was palpable in my slightly trembling voice. Your stepmother here. What gives you the right to consider something so outrageous? Oliver was taken aback, his jaw dropping in disbelief. Even though he suddenly halted his progress, the tense stillness between us only grew. This is impossible. It just couldn't be done. My thoughts were going all over the place. My countenance, which was a blend of bewilderment and terror, was likely conveying to him the level of unease I was experiencing as I met his gaze. How could he possibly come to this conclusion? I was absolutely bewildered. Oliver remained fixed on me the whole time, his breath coming out softly and trembling. He stepped back almost hesitantly to put some space between us, but the tension was palpable, as if it were resonating throughout the entire room. I have something to tell you, Oliver. I am not sure, I responded, my voice quivering. Something clicked into place as I glanced over at you the other morning while you slumbered. Dude, you're totally grown up now. You're an adult now. I couldn't hold back my emotions any longer, even if my sentences stumbled. I stared at him, trying to find the words to express how I felt as tears filled my eyes. I was at a loss for what to do as his gaze remained fixated on me as well. It's not only your age, it's your entire demeanor and physique. You're simply not a child anymore. I persisted, attempting to articulate my complex ideas. When you were a tiny boy, I had no qualms about letting you sleep in my bed. I see how foolish that was now that I can look back on it. That could have been really risky for us both now that I'm thinking about it. I said strongly but slowly that I would not inform your father. I'm sure you're the center of attention at university because you're such an outstanding young guy. In return for my remaining silent, though, you are welcome to spend some time with your aunt. Listen up, you won't be able to remain in this place. Oliver lowered his head slightly after being silent for a while. His eyes betrayed remorse. With a quiver in his voice, he pleaded with her not to inform his father. I apologize sincerely. I assure you that I will go and stay with my aunt. A range of feelings, fear, regret, and perhaps even a hint of emptiness, appeared on his face. However, there was more to it than that. I was at a loss for words. It occurred to Andrea. What if I had felt anything for Oliver? Is it possible that I erred? The burden of her thoughts caused her to take a deep breath. I was perplexed by his youthful vigor and vitality. A flash of vulnerability or emotional anarchy may have rendered my best efforts futile. I believe I managed it nicely, though. Whatever the case may be, I acted morally. She appeared to be mentally reviewing the occurrences as she nodded to herself for a brief period. There's no need to worry. Although it was strange and difficult, it is now over. Everything is fine now that Oliver is living with his aunt. At least for the time being, I feel like things are under control, albeit I was confused. Andrea sighed with relief and waited a moment. Truly, I'm okay, she told herself, as if she had finally found some serenity. What was ahead was obviously a mystery to her. As time went on, everything began to calm down. Oliver would act more and more normally on his visits to the house at first. Words and deeds that were uncomfortable previously disappeared. It appeared as though all the pieces were fitting together again. I felt some relief when school holidays rolled around because Oliver had moved back home with me. He had transformed himself over that period. He exhibited greater composure and maturity in his behavior. Those anxious times seemed like a distant memory. For Andrea, Oliver's return was a litmus test. She persuaded herself that everything had to settle down during those 5 months. Something had changed as Oliver returned to find out. He seemed more composed and mature in his demeanor. Anxieties and other uneasy behaviors subsided. When Andrea saw that Oliver was behaving normally again, she felt relieved. As far as Andrea was concerned, everything was back to normal. This point, Oliver gets it. He is aware of the limits and has come to terms with his circumstances. That long ago conflict? Nothing remains of it. After a few periods of silence, Andrea inhaled deeply. She wondered whether this wasn't the greatest option. It was taken care of by time. At this point, the dynamic is that of a typical stepfamily. I thought everything was alright for a while. I was really relieved because my husband Dale was away on a business trip for a week. At long last, I have some alone time. Here I could relax and let go of the burdens I had been bearing. Recently, Oliver had been behaving in a lot more adult manner, which truly calmed me down. Despite my reluctance to acknowledge it, our trials had ultimately led us to a more favorable position. I had assumed we were safe. Which night, though? It was unexpected. I felt an odd sensation of peace once Dale departed and the house was silent. I sank into a gentle slumber in my cozy bed. Although I sensed an oddity, what it was I had no idea. In the dead of night, I was startled out of my slumber by some sound. Someone was approaching my room when I heard a creaking sound and then the sound of footsteps. Upon regaining consciousness, I noticed a shadow scuttling across the floor. I thought my heart had stopped for one instant. My name is Oliver. My room was where he was. With a stealthy motion, he secured the door's latch. A chilling feeling of terror swept over me. What gives? Why is this fun? Though I couldn't put my finger on it, I had the distinct impression that something was off. I was helpless. Still, I remained mute. This required my undivided attention. Is that you, Oliver? My voice was still tinged with dread when I spoke, but I was attempting to come off as courageous. Why are you in this place? I felt even more apprehensive when his calm tone and intense gaze locked onto me. Yes, Andrea, he remarked, as if nothing out of the ordinary had transpired. My only desire is to have a conversation. I long to be in your presence. My anxiety levels skyrocketed. What was his intention? His sudden desire to alter everything begs the question. Why? I was startled by the intensity of his gaze. He appeared to be prepared to test any and all boundaries, given his unwavering resolve and self-confidence. He advanced toward me, his eyes fixed on mine the whole time. At that particular instant, my entire being fought against him. On the other hand, he was drawing dangerously near. Instinctively, I began to back away, even though I didn't want to. I begged Oliver to stop while my voice betrayed my obvious discomfort. Excuse me, but I'm not prepared for this. Despite my mental screams, my voice came out as calm and collected. Will you be available tomorrow evening? In the evening of tomorrow, things will change. Count on my presence. This, however, is not the time. The effort to exit the room was an act of sheer willpower on my part. I couldn't take my gaze off of him. A tempest of bewilderment and defiance raged through my emotions, taking me apart at the same time as the circumstance appeared to be drawing me closer. Do yourself a favor and subscribe if you're absolutely dying to know what happens next and would like to read more stories like this. So you won't miss an episode, be sure to turn on notifications. Your support in the form of likes and comments is invaluable. Their support motivates me to continue writing. It would be fascinating to know where country you are tuning in from as well. Keep an eye out for the upcoming chapter.